We really should have waiting parents, not waiting children. Over 100,000 children are available for adoption through the U.S. foster care system, and 27% don't have anyone, like a relative or foster parent, in the process of adopting them. 60% are between the ages of 5 and 17, and 2/3 are part of sibling groups of 2 to 8 children. Hey listener, my name is Marcy Bursack. My husband and I chose adoption as our plan A. After blogging about our journey adopting a sibling pair, I began mentoring families right in my own living room. That passion grew into the Forgotten Adoption Option, a nonprofit I now lead as a volunteer while working full-time in the tech industry. From my blog, 3 books, app, and classroom lesson to now a 45-minute course called Foster Care Adoption Simplified, which you can find at ForgottenAdoptionOption.com, I've created practical, heartfelt resources to help families navigate the foster care adoption process. As you listen to this episode, I encourage you to ask yourself, who in my circle needs to hear this? It's often people in what we call helper professions, people like therapists, nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters, social workers, and teachers like my husband. These are the people who tend to step forward to adopt children from foster care. But this work isn't only about becoming an adoptive family, it's also about becoming an advocate and ally. Every waiting child deserves not just a forever family, but a community of people who champion their future. Whatever led you to this podcast, I am thrilled that you are here. My mission is simple, to help every waiting child be with their forever family. And that's exactly why I host this podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, you'll hear about how Pennsylvania churches are uniting to support foster and adoptive families. During the pandemic, a while back, I was asked to present at a webinar through a group called Barren to Beautiful, and a woman named Jess Pete learned about my presentation, and we got connected on social media. There's a little bit of like follow the dots. So she is the Erie County coordinator for an organization called Keystone Family Alliance. And I began shipping my books to her to use at a raffle for their fundraising event. Fast forward, we've kept in touch over social, things like that, a few years, and Jess invited me to be the keynote speaker for the Keystone Family Alliance's annual fundraising event. So this is February 2025. And that's where I was introduced to Vince, the executive director of Keystone Family Alliance. Over the years, Vince has spearheaded innovative outreach and sustainable initiatives that create opportunities for vulnerable children and families to thrive. It's quite an interesting backstory, so we'll dive into that. I invited Vince to be a guest on the show to share about his mission and approach, because I really think that the organization has something really beautiful going on that's working that others across the country could really implement wherever you are. So listeners, this might be for you to take and tell. It might be for you to just be aware of, but I think there's some really good takeaways from here. And you've heard me say that before, that not everyone has the desire to adopt. And I know some of you have expressed that you want to do something that's helpful. So I really believe what Vince has to share is a way that you could help and make a significant impact. So Vince, you're also the founder of the organization. And this is such an interesting story. Can you share with our listeners, where did this all come from? Where did this kind of get its inklings and then take legs?
Yeah. Well, I actually like to say I am a cowboy. I have a degree in animal science from Penn State University. I was working as a herdsman for a large Angus farm, taking care of 600 head of black Angus and kind of loving that life. And God clearly ended up calling me into full-time ministry as a youth pastor. Eventually came back to State College Christian Church, was the church that I attended as a college student at Penn State. And ended up being asked to be the lead pastor of the church in 2006. And at that time, there was a 50-year-old congregation with no adults that had ever gone on a mission trip. We were a pretty inwardly focused congregation. And we knew that that story needed to be rewritten. So I just really started to pray intentionally about what that could look like for our church. And within a week of that prayer, I got an invitation to go to Zambia to help start a piggery. So now I'm using my animal science degree as a pastor, serving vulnerable children in Africa. And it was that trip where my wife and I really just kind of had our hearts broke for the needs of orphans. At the time, 10% of the population was orphaned because of the HIV and AIDS. So that whole pandemic just kind of opened our eyes, and we were able to come back and share with my small church the needs that we saw in Zambia. And we had 40 kids at a day camp that summer. that raised $800 that we sent over to a friend in Zambia to sponsor three orphans at an existing orphan school. And then he sent me 15 profiles of children who were orphaned, not going to school, not eating food every day, didn't have medical care. So I just shared those with my small church, and almost immediately, all 15 of those children were being sponsored by individuals in the church. So my friend in Zambia sent me another 15 profiles, and before I know it, our church of about 100 is sponsoring 46 kids now in Zambia. And they started a school that they called Haven of Hope. Haven of Hope then blossomed into two schools in Zambia, one in Uganda, with now more than 400 children that are being sponsored and now graduating from high school, serving their communities in a whole bunch of different ways. So I love to share that story because what I found as a pastor, it wasn't that my church didn't care. They just had no idea what the needs were,
Hmm.
and they didn't know how to take a practical next step. So that was far away. Over the next 3 years, I had 30% of our church that went on a mission trip to Zambia, met their sponsored child, changed our church, changed hundreds of orphans' lives. But at the same time, in Center County, then I'm meeting with 12 pastors every week, and we're just praying together. But a few of those guys said, what if we actually did something to serve the community together? So I said to them, what if we started an orphan care ministry? And they said, absolutely, let's do that. I asked them if they'd find a representative from their church who had a heartbeat already for foster care, adoption, or international orphan care. And so they found somebody, and we began to gather those church representatives. And within a few months, officially became what was known as the Center County Orphan Care Alliance. And we just started to kind of serve in this space. But what we found is when I was on an elevator with one of the directors at Children in Youth Services, I just said, hey, as a church in the county, how can we serve your agency? And her response was, you're going to do one event and we won't hear from you again. There's kind of this churches do a savior for a day, but we're not there for the long haul. So that kind of broke our hearts. We realized, hey, we need to rewrite this story. And thankfully, within a year and a half, the churches in our county had become the number one recruiter of foster and adoptive homes. And then within 3 years, they said, hey, you guys aren't going away. Can we have a seat at your table? And we've been in the room with them for now well over a decade and just really seen the story rewritten on behalf of the county's kids. So that was a long kind of intro to how the story got started, but there you go.
I feel like we got a listener that was like, hang on, I had to pull my car over. Marcy, he just said piggery. Like, were you raising pigs? Is that what you call a piggery?
Yes, it is a place where you're going to grow and raise pigs. And it actually was supposed to have a fishery attached to it. So like pig waste feeds the fish, and it's all like this self-sustainable kind of raising pigs to be able to support the work of a ministry over there.
Something that feels absolutely not connected to helping in this space. Like, there you go. Vince was doing something completely that seemed different. And I'm curious because some listeners might remember Gary Schneider, who started Orphan Sunday, mentioned
Yeah.
Zambia and his work with that. Were you all connected at some point?
So I know Gary. We have talked, love the what Gary's doing. We actually were never connected in Zambia. So no connection there. Just
Like ignited a
yeah.
couple different, yeah, things to happen from there. And so, wow, Vince. Okay, so you do you still have the hat and the boots because you introduced yourself as a cowboy?
I absolutely do still have my boots and hat, and I still have cows and sheep and stuff in the backyard. So couldn't let go of it that quickly.
Amazing. And you also mentioned something else that stuck out was when you're having this conversation with the professionals in the system and you're like, how can we serve you? Which is probably a question that isn't asked a lot, right? It's not, hi, I have this idea, I'm here to tell you. It's, what do you need? And to get a response that wasn't like, oh, that's so nice that you asked, it was more like, you're not going to really hang out and help in this space. So I'm curious, like in your own heart, Vince, because I think sometimes we can hear feedback and honesty and it can be hard. And I'm curious, how did you process that in a way that wasn't like, well, they don't want my help?
Yeah, I actually don't remember how I fully responded to that, with the exception of knowing that that isn't the story that the Jesus in the Bible that I follow wants us to be able to tell. And unfortunately, I do think there's way too many churches that say, hey, we follow the Bible, but they're actually not obeying what the Bible tells us to do. So I oftentimes feel like we do need to apologize for what some of us have made the church into, rather than, you know what, Jesus says you need to go serve the least of these. Like pure religion is to look after orphans and vulnerable children. If we want to get the gospel right, we need to be doing this. So that just kind of was a conviction for us that we need to lean into this space and rewrite that story for our local churches.
Like it was well received, Vince. That's a nice ear when people can, you can see like I'm hearing you, even though I don't want to hear what you just said, but I hear what you said. So okay, so we've got this alliance formed, but we're still not at Keystone. We're at a whole different name still. So what's the next phase of the
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, so in 2020, we just started to feel like God was telling us to take what was happening in Center County to the other 66 counties in the state of Pennsylvania. And so during COVID in 2021, I stood in front of a camera with what felt like a really huge faith step for us. Um, I was pastor in a church that we had planted 6 years before that. We loved the church, we loved the people, and my wife was like, "Really, Vince, you're going to go kind of start a new career. We have to raise funds." And but we knew this is what God was calling us. So we just kind of asked four questions in that camera during COVID and that virtual event. And we just started to say, what if one day through the local churches in Pennsylvania, we could recruit at least three foster families in all 500 Pennsylvania school districts that are willing to take sibling groups and children over the age of 8 years old, a demographic of kind of unwanted uh, children in this space. So that was our first what if. The second was, what if we could have a care community willing to wrap around every one of those families before they ever said yes, so that they would be well supported in their journey. Research kind of shows us that nearly 90% of foster families are not going to make it to the 2 year mark. But if we can get a care community to support them, nearly 90% of those families being supported are going to make it beyond 2 years. So that was our second what if. Our third what if was just what if one day there were at least 550 Jesus followers in every county registered as volunteers through a platform we call Gateway, where they're going to receive an email anytime Children and Youth Services has a need in their county. Then they can just respond to that email to meet tangible needs or mentors for biological moms trying to get kids back, or whatever. So that was our third what if, saying, hey, what if we can help our churches love their neighbors by having this real need come in their inbox? And then the fourth what if is, what if one day we can have at least 39 churches in every county getting in the room together to work together to share ideas and resources and imaginations to rewrite the story on behalf of Pennsylvania's vulnerable children and families. So those were kind of our four what ifs that took us statewide, and eventually officially became Keystone Family Alliance. And over the last 4 years, it's just been a real joy to watch God do more than we could have asked or imagined. We have county coordinators now in 27 counties that kind of oversee that vision locally, with more than 4,500 people using Gateway. Last year, 1,100 people were serving on care communities. We, through direct events, had more than 75 people step up in the last handful of months to foster and adopt. And so we're just loving it. Literally hundreds of churches now doing something in the state that were doing nothing a couple of years ago. So that's the morph into Keystone Family Alliance.
Incredible history, because I think for people that are thinking, wow, like you kind of just took a leap of faith and then you kind of jumped in and you learned. And I am particularly fascinated and encouraging you that like what you're doing is incredibly right and beautiful, right? Like I just think about in my own area, I'm like, man, if we had like every church kind of doing a piece of this, and being supported in that. And for listeners, if you're new to this space and you're thinking, why did Vince just say that foster families kind of aren't here 2 years later? And Vince, maybe we can touch on that. Like what are things that lead foster families to kind of step in, go through this lengthy licensing process, deal with the red tape of everything and get introduced to kids, and then why are they leaving 2 years later?
Yeah, I like to say we all sign up for this with like a level 10 kind of commitment. Like, hey, I'm going to go change a child's life. This is going to be for me and my wife. We had three biological children. Our youngest was 8 when we entered this space, and we thought we're pretty good parents if we do say so ourselves. We got this thing figured out. Our first placement was a 3-year-old little boy and an 18-month little girl that showed up with Mountain Dew in their bottles. They had all kinds of trauma that they came into our home with, and that evening was absolute chaos at our home. They didn't come with enough clothes to be able to even dress them the next day. They were scheduling doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, visits with social workers, visits with bio parents, and it's just absolute chaos. And then we go to a July 4th party the next day that our neighbors invited us to. They're the only people we know, but there's 100 people in the outside picnic, and these children are running up to everybody, sitting on their laps, like no, just the attachment issue. So that story, I think, just kind of illustrates like the trauma that we don't expect. I would say we thought this was going to be a piece of cake, but the cake got really messy really fast. And so I think that's what, and those were a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. When you take in a 13-year-old who's had a number of years of neglect, abuse, whatever, they're coming with a bunch of trauma that we are not equipped to handle when we say yes to this. So our level 10 commitment goes to a level 5 pretty quick. And a lot of times it's just like one more thing and I'm done. I'm going to call CYS and come tell them to take these kids. So that's why we're passionate about the care community models where we need teams to do this journey with us so that we can do it longer and stronger.
It's like as you're with this group of people from the church that are saying, "Hi, we've got you," and so what kinds of things are they doing to be supportive, Vince? Like, are they helping with the clothing piece you mentioned? Are they stepping in with childcare? What are they doing?
Yeah. A year and a half ago, we took in a sibling group of 3 in our school district. We're not a long-term option for the county anymore because we've adopted a handful and we have to know the difference between our load and limit. But those kids showed up that night and we said, we'll take them for, we've got 6 weeks and we'll try to recruit a foster family for them. But when they showed up, they didn't have enough clothes. Um, all the stuff I just had mentioned before, it was chaos at our house. Somebody in our care community showed up with a lasagna that night. My wife was like, praise Jesus, we can make it through the night. That lasagna was a game changer because she didn't have to think about making a meal. So the next day, when people in our care community show up and say, can we help drive your kids, these kids to appointments? Over the next 6 weeks, our care community saved us hours and hours and hours of drive time that now we could get the laundry done or we could take care of things that we needed to. I went out of town for a week. The team showed up and said, hey, we're going to make sure that your family has a meal every night. A few nights they picked kids up, took them to their house, fed them, brought them home at mealtime. So I just like to say when I got home, my wife still had her sanity. It was so important. So these teams, we like to say everyone can do something. What is your something? Maybe you can't or you shouldn't foster or adopt, but you can absolutely take a meal. You can provide transportation, childcare, so a foster family can get out of the house. I hear families all the time say, we have not been out of the home for a year and a half. I wish I had one of these care communities. And we're saying, we wish you did too, because we want you to stay at it longer and stronger.
Amazing. And the lasagna just makes that sounds delicious, but like a big meal for a growing family. I mean, that's a huge gift. And I wonder, Vince, so if a listener's thinking, I could totally do those things, I just don't know how. Do you kind of give suggestions to these care communities of like here are ways to step in, or how does kind of that approach work?
Yeah, so we're an affiliate of a ministry called Promise 686 that has the systems to be able to kind of coach this. So they've just been a huge tool for us as we've expanded across the state, where there's training. And so a care community has a team leader, and they're able to use an online system to schedule meal delivery. So a care community, when you commit to it, we want you to be one of at least 5 people serving one foster family. So that foster family is going to get a meal delivered to their home every week. So that's kind of the low hanging fruit. if you sign up, you're probably going to be part of taking a meal or having a meal delivered. But maybe you can help with the childcare or the laundry. We have college students giving guitar lessons to foster children, which gives the family a break and it gives that child another mentor. So there is all kinds of suggestions through the tools that we have. And again, our team goes in and equips churches to be able to do this. We want every church to have an advocate that runs these through the local church.
Yes, I'm just like Googling on the other side. I'm like, okay, it's like a software and it's wow, it's super effective. I'll have to check that out too. And so, okay, so let's say, because this kind of goes two ways, Vince. Let's say a listener is in Pennsylvania, their church does or doesn't have this. There's kind of that angle of like, what can that listener do? But let's say we're a listener outside of Pennsylvania. Like we're in Missouri, right? We don't have a connected system like this that I'm aware of in our churches. We have little like groups going on at various ones
Yeah.
here and there, but it's not everywhere. How would we take action if we're one of those people? What would we do next?
Yeah, there's definitely a handful of different levels that I could suggest there. And we're always happy to do consulting with churches or ministries that are saying, how can we equip churches to do this better? But for sure, Promise 686 is a great tool. They're working in about 42 states, I think, around the country right now. Um, they would be a great connection. CAFO, so the Christian Alliance for Orphans, their website has numerous resources and organizations that are doing this stuff around the country. And as I mentioned, our website is full of resources. We are happy to do consulting with churches to help get them connected to the right pieces or help them launch. Um, but yeah, there's lots of resources out there, and I would say it's probably very dependent on that individual church. If they're in Pennsylvania, we absolutely can equip Pennsylvania churches. We have a team that's ready to do that.
It's simple and so effective and collaborative. And so I'm curious, like let's say, because maybe there's a listener that's like what you had shared a few minutes ago. Someone was like, "Oh, I'd love to have that kind of support around me." Do you have encouragement wherever we are in the nation if we're like, this is hard, like this is really hard. I'm a single mom. I've been doing this a long time. Whatever our story is, what would you encourage us to do if we don't have this kind of support system?
When my wife and I started, I was a pastor. We walked into church that first Sunday with these two extra kiddos. Everybody knew we were doing foster care. They walked up to us and said, "How can we help you?" We probably knew we needed help, but we didn't know what to ask for. And did you actually mean it when you offered the help? So there's kind of this the beauty of the care communities is people go through an orientation and they commit to serving you. So you know you're not asking them to do something they didn't sign up for. I say all that to say, like, my wife and I didn't know we needed help. I would say if you're in a space where this isn't happening yet, you get to be the voice to start to help people understand that there is a need and don't let people think that you're doing okay if you're not. Don't be afraid to invite somebody in or even go to your church leadership and say, hey, here's a deal. Here's I can show you a video from Keystone Family Alliance or from Promise or CAFO or something that shows you that there's a real need, and here's some systems on how we can get our churches engaged to make a difference to my family and to the other families in our community that might be doing this. So I would just say, hey, speak up because your voice absolutely matters. They, I just keep saying this, our churches, it's not that our churches don't care. They just don't know what the needs are and they don't know how to take a practical next step. So if you'd like to get something started in your space of influence, reach out, talk to the right people, start telling the people at your church you want to make some things happen.
It's kind of the theme of everything we're talking about, where it's not like, hi, I just had good intention. I'm going to do something for 5 minutes or a day or a year. It's like we want to create long-term impact by helping to support families in this space. And so as we close, Vince, you mentioned we can go to your website. What is the URL? How would we find you and your work?
Yep. So keyfam.org. So KEYFAM.org. And feel free to shoot me an email. It's just vince@keyfam.org. And we would be more than happy to get you connected with resources locally. We're working with folks all over the country or try to point you in the right direction.
Vince, it's such a gift to be able to share what you're doing with our listeners, and so glad to know how once upon a cowboy in a piggery doing all these things, and now the things you're doing for kids. It's incredible. And you still get to have your animals. So it sounds like a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what kind of with that point, it doesn't matter what your background is. Like we just say, like God's going to use you. You might be the wrong person with the wrong resources at the wrong time, but if He's inviting you into space, like go for it. Doesn't matter what your background is. Just take the next step.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. It truly matters that you listen today, because by tuning in, you're opening your heart to the stories of children in foster care, sparking empathy and starting to see how your unique role, whether as a friend, advocate, or even as a future adoptive parent, can bring hope and belonging to a child or sibling group that is waiting. I also want to personally invite you to reach out to me to ask anything that's on your heart. I promise no judgment. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and I mean it when I say you can ask anything. I know it can feel awkward to ask questions publicly, and that's why I carve out time during my lunch hour and evenings while my kids and husband are at martial arts to mentor others one-on-one. Your questions matter, your curiosity matters, and most importantly, the role you are playing in helping children in foster care matters. Together, we can bring hope and belonging. Until next time, take care and keep the conversation going.